Welcome to the 82nd episode of the GameFor Podcast. In this episode, we'll talk about what Hollywood and other popular media will do to our tabletop games. I'm Adam.
And I'm Matt.
And this is the GameFor Podcast. GameFor is a platform to help connect tabletop gamers and to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Matt and I are part of a software development and design company called MilkCan. And because most of the folks at MilkCan love tabletop games, we developed the GameFor app and launched it in early 2018. We launched this companion podcast in June 2019 to help tabletop gamers get more enjoyment out of their hobby. Due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, we hibernated the GameFor app in July of 2020 and plan to bring back a retooled version of the app for Android, iOS, and the web when gaming in person is safer. Until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming.
Yes.
What kind of things have you been doing in your tabletop gaming? Anything? I know you've been busy a lot.
Yeah, I've been busy, but I am going to be collecting games here shortly. So by the time this
will
airs,
go live on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll have run the 2022 That Conference Wisconsin Dells Game Night.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, that's always fun. So we borrow a gaming library from one of our local shops, Boardlandia.
Mm-hmm.
They've been helping out, I think since almost the first year. So that's been probably 10 years for them, which is pretty awesome.
And that conference is a tech conference aimed towards mainly developers and stuff like that for the most part.
Web and mobile developers,
right.
Some server people and stuff.
But a lot of folks in that realm do dig tabletop games.
They seem to, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first time I ever went to the game night, it was more people than I thought, but it was still pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
Pre-pandemic, when we had the last That Conference,
2019 probably,
there was a couple hundred people there that night.
Yeah,
it was full.
Oh yeah,
I've been to several large conferences that have not had a gaming space that busy, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I help run that. So I use the game library from Boardlandia, and then
use our app.
Yeah, I use our app to lend out games, and sometimes I even get to play some games, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping I get to play some this time, and have some fun.
And we're currently recording together in the office. Lately, we've been recording at home because we've been pretty busy, and it's sometimes working from home and all that kind of stuff. So
schedule-wise, it's I guess we could fit ourselves in this hour.
Yeah, exactly. And today it was basically us being in the office, and we were like, well, we can do it in the afternoon on Monday, and then so that's why we're here. And it may sound a bit different. We're on different microphones and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Did you get a chance to do any kind of, you were talking about maybe being able to do some hobby? No?
Yeah, no. My presentation took a lot longer to put together on Sunday than I thought, because
you're not only just running. Yeah,
I'll be presenting. Actually, all three kids are presenting. So.
Oh, wow. So you're doing a presentation at this tech conference, and all three of your children are also doing it.
Yep, all separately.
Separately?
Yeah, separately. Which
not
is
like in a tag team thing.
No, yeah,
right.
All three. This will be my oldest, his fourth time presenting, I believe he said. And then two younger ones have done one together before. This will be the first time for both of them solo. And Cameron, my youngest, he is 10. So he is presenting, but his first time he went, so he was a newborn. So he was 6 months old at the time. So
he didn't do a presentation when he was
6 months. He did not, but
no.
It's pretty crazy that, basically like we were talking, we were debating a couple of years ago, do we go, do we not go? And our kids were like, well, we do this. This is just what
we always
do.
Go. This
right?
Is,
yeah, and then we're like, oh wait, Cameron's never not gone during the summer. So
yeah.
I guess this is what we do now. So
yeah, well, that's pretty cool, though.
But yeah, it's fun, and great opportunity for them to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
But that's me in a nutshell.
There's a joke there about being inside of a nutshell.
Yes.
It's from the Austin Powers movie. Yeah.
But how about you?
Yeah. Well, let's see here. So I finished painting that Fishman 3D print on Twitch. It turned out pretty well. I was pretty happy with it. Needs a little bit of varnish, and then I need to decide whether I want to go with a gloss varnish because he's a Fishman and he should be wet or something, or do I not? I'm not sure. So that's a good question. I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet. Anyway. But that'll be coming up soon, I think, finishing up that with the varnish. And then the only other hobby I've been doing has been working on Twitch. I've been working on a slightly modified Adeptus Mechanicus model. I think he's called a Tech Priest Dominus, if I remember correctly, is the actual technical name of the figure from Games Workshop. And I've been painting him on Twitch, doing... I've been mainly working on his cloak, and then I think it was Friday I worked on his little weird robot spider feet. Started painting things, metal and stuff like that. And I'll be weathering those quite a bit and kind of messing them up. But
it kind of reminded me of like Doc Ock.
Yeah, a little bit. I could see that. Sure. Yeah, he's got lots of extra arms too. Yeah, but he's also got like weird spider feet underneath his. I was just doing the international symbol for weird spider feet, but you guys couldn't see it because it's a podcast.
But I mean, everybody knows that symbol.
So. Exactly right. Yeah. That particular hand gesture. Yeah, but otherwise, no, I haven't had any time for a regular hobby because I've been working, this is from 2 weeks ago, the same note, working nonstop in layout mode for the new game. However,
dun, dun, dun.
It's basically done. Like, I literally, like this morning, I'm like, oh, there was that one thing I was going to add. And so I got to do that when I get home. And then I'm streaming tonight on Twitch because we're recording this on a Monday. And then after that, Vince and I are going to get online and we're going to look some things over again. And I very possibly will be sending it off for its first proof, which will be great because it will kind of get the foot off the pedal a little bit there. Although, there's going to have to be 3 videos made for the launch and also marketing stuff and new web page on the website and all that kind of jazz. So it's still busy, but won't be as busy.
See, this is when like the elves need to come at night and just get some of the stuff done for you.
If I could get some friggin' elves, man, that'd be awesome. Yeah, no, it's seriously like it's just one of those things where this game, in comparison to the last one, I don't know. It was one of those situations where we just sort of let it sort of float, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh God, it's just about August, and so we need to do much better with our scheduling for the next year's game. We've talked about Gantt charts, right? That's a thing.
It is a thing.
Yeah. So we're gonna maybe do some of that. Vince has got far more of a project manager background than I do. So that'll be useful.
Yeah, everybody goes like, "Oh man, if I ran my own stuff, I wouldn't have it. I would do it my own way, and nobody could tell me what to do." And then you start understanding why some of the stuff is done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we were just like, it'll come out when it's come out, that's fine. But we're like, it probably ought to come out in the summer, and then we were initially thinking late July, and now we're looking at. And again, if we were just going straight to PDF, it would come out as soon as we were done. We would just like push a button and be like, ta-da, there it is, or whatever. But because it has to go and get printed on demand, and then we have to look at the print on demand version to see if it sucks or not, or because you never know with the colors and this and that and other thing. So there's that kind of thing.
Is this one like a lot more expensive because it's bigger, right? Like
this is the last game was 64 pages. This one's 120.
Wow.
Yeah, we went way overboard a little bit, I think, but because there's so many different scenarios. It's got a very branching structure to the way you go, and it's a whole thing. But anyway, you folks will see it soon. It will be a little bit more expensive, but not much. Like, though it's nearly double in size, it will not double in cost, not anywhere near.
Wow, that's awesome.
Well, because we're, like I said many times before, bad capitalists. So we're going to, there will be a higher price, but barely, But
you're not going to be like, it'll be $300 at launch.
Well, Lord knows, no. I mean, like the last one was $10 or $15 shipping for the print version, and you got the PDF version. Don't hold me to this, but we're aiming at maybe $13 with an $18 printed version plus shipping, which is like $3 more, but for nearly double the amount of pages. I don't know. We're not 100% sure on that yet, but that's where we're thinking we're probably going.
Even if you round it up, I think everybody would be pretty happy. There's not too many things you can walk into your like local game shop and be like, I'm going to spend $20.
Sure. That's very possible. So yeah, we got to run the numbers a little bit more and stuff like that, but that's kind of what we're aiming at right now, we think. So
cool.
But yeah, otherwise I'm looking forward to actually getting some other regular hobby stuff done that's not on Twitch. I mean, I like doing the stuff on Twitch, and it's great that it gives me basically 6 hours a week, like almost guaranteed generally stuff. Although I'll do Monday like next week, like beginning of August, and then after that, I won't be able to do Fridays because I'll be at Gen Con. So, yeah. And then I think right after I get back from Gen Con, then we'll have to do another one of these podcasts. So it should not mess with our schedule, I don't believe.
No, it's been... I'm not going to knock on the table because it'll pound everybody's ear.
Right.
Yeah, it's
knock.
We've been... The timing's been oddly working out in our favor this year.
Yeah, the Every Other Sunday show is going to be a bit screwed up because of Gen Con. So I already let the folks know that yesterday during the broadcast. So... But the upside is that once it gets a little off schedule there, then if we stay on that kind of off schedule, it won't get messed up when I go to DC for Nova Open. So that's good too. Otherwise, it would have been, I don't know, if we would have tried to adjust it and then we would have to readjust it again, and it's a whole thing. So anyway, this subject kind of came from, I think, was it Thursday? I think it was Thursday.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Because last week, mainly last week was, speaking of conventions, San Diego Comic-Con. Right. So, because all of a sudden, and you and I both were like, at different times, we're like, why are all these trailers coming out?
Yeah, like, there's finally there's a lot of news coming out right now.
Like, a bunch of big nerd news coming out.
And,
right, yeah. I forgot about the San Diego Comic-Con.
There was money involved.
I've never gone, and I've never really paid close attention to it, I guess, necessarily.
It seems like it's been so long since there's been, like, a true Comic-Con for San Diego. Like, it's been a few years since I think they've had I
don't remember. Did they have one last year? I thought they did.
They probably did, but I feel like people were so up in the air about whether it was going to happen that it wasn't like this where it's a normal, like, everything gets announced and released at the same time. Like,
I think that, and then also, and we've seen that this summer where all of a sudden all of these shows have come out this summer because they were all sort of boned because of the pandemic. So, like, all of a sudden, like, like The Boys came out and Stranger Things came out, and what other shows did Emily and I watch? That For All Mankind new season, and like just a bunch of different things. What We Do in the Shadows, like all this stuff is just all dropping in like July and August.
Solar Opposites.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I'm glad that that's happening. But while the new trailers and things were coming out from San Diego Comic-Con, one of the big ones, at least in our mind, was the big new fancy Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yeah. That was like I saw it like I'm like, what? What's this?
I think I knew they were doing it.
Yeah, but I think I kind of like it was like post-traumatic stress syndrome. Like I was like
from the
previous ones.
Well, I only ever saw the first one, like when it had like a Wayans brother in it and somebody else, Jeremy Irons, and Thora Birch was like in it, but she seemed like she had been filmed separately or something. Yeah, I don't know what was going on there.
The dragon looked like they had basically taken the thing from Neverending Story and then
just shaved it.
And they're like, hey, it's a dragon now. And
when did that movie come out? Do you remember?
90.
It was in the 90s, wasn't it? Yeah, late 90s.
Yep.
Yeah, and it wasn't great. And it was not even necessarily like, oh boy, the special effects and stuff. It was just badly written, kind of.
Yeah, and you're like, well, this isn't really D&D. This is just a fantasy movie.
Weird fantasy with the name of D&D, yeah. But watching the trailer that we saw come out last week, like it's definitely got a lot of things in it where, like, as a person who's played D&D, you're like, oh, that's an owlbear, and that's a mimic, and that's a displacer beast, and like that's, and
yeah. And there was some humor. Like there was some stuff that actually made me laugh.
Sure.
Like
in the trailer, which is always good. We discussed about how the musical choice was weird,
jarring, but
because it was like it was a Led Zeppelin song, and you're like, but why though? Yeah, right. But it's fine.
It should have been like Jethro Tull or something.
Yeah, I don't. Well,
another brick in the wall would have been.
That's not Jethro Tull.
What is that?
Thick as a Brick.
Thick as a Brick. Thick as a Brick would have been a good one.
Because the song was Whole Lot of Love, and I'm like, but it didn't. Yeah.
No. Oh, it should have been like Jane's Addiction. Been caught stealing.
Well, I guess that's a possibility too. Yeah,
Honor Among Thieves. Come on, that would have been great.
No, but it's got people in it like Chris Pine and the other ones. I don't remember anybody else who was in it.
Yeah, I recognized them, but I was.
There was some that I was like, oh yeah. Well, there was one that she was the redheaded girl in the It movies. Yeah, I think she's the druid. I
just put that together.
Yeah. Anyway, nonetheless, it looks big budget.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It looks pretty fancy. And it's coming out someday. We don't know when. I don't think. Did it say? I don't remember if it said.
Was it already August?
No. Really? No. I don't remember actually. I just remember it was pretty cool, and I was like, well, that's pretty neat. But it's one of those things that happens sometimes, and we've been seeing it more and more, and we're going to talk about some of the examples
March
here.
3rd next year.
March 3rd next year, gotcha. But there are times when, like, for a while, all of a sudden Hollywood and popular media started to try to, like, oh, but video games, though, you know what I mean? And you get some things here and there, and it depends. I mean, maybe you get, like...
Well, as soon as something makes us $1, then everyone else is like, oh, well, I've got to get on that, so we have to make that same thing. It's like I just got through a book that was on video games, and it was about studios closing and developers and stuff, and then it was talking about mobile games and how, like, once somebody realized, like, oh, and we can give away the game for free, but then charge for every little timer and microtransactions. Everybody has to do it now, and it's like, yeah, they just...
Well, I think that generally the feeling is that you're leaving money on the table if you don't.
Right.
Like, well, these guys are making money doing it, and you're like, yeah, technically, but they're evil. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, yeah, but money though, and you're like, well,
Yeah, they're like, hey, there's one movie about this guy planting a tree. The Johnny Appleseed biography. That like suddenly became this like breakaway hit.
Exactly.
All of a sudden, it'd be like folklore movies just as far as the eye could see.
Tons of dudes planting trees. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, and we. Like, how many times did they try to make a decent comic book movie, and it just didn't work, and it sort of didn't work,
Right.
And then even the Spider-Man ones, the Sony Spider-Man ones with Tobey Maguire were like, oh, they did great, and you're like, okay, well, that's something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
then they're like, oh, now we made the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right. It
So
was
now
it was
everybody
Iron Man
has-
that kind of really got that rolling.
Right. Everybody has a universe now. So
Right.
like they're even I just heard this weekend they're talking about the Top Gun universe.
Oh, a Top Gun cinematic universe.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Iron Eagle all over again.
Oh, I remember that movie.
Well, the movies, there was multiple.
Yeah, I think I only ever watched the first one. I'm bad at watching
The
sequels.
second one was okay, but the funny thing is, like, the second one was about them doing a strike in like Iran or something like that, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, and it was like them training the next crew. So
Yeah.
it's kind of parallel. So people are starting to like, oh, the third one is going to be this. 'Cause
Yeah.
Louis Gossett Jr. is going to.
That's why you want to stick with tabletop games, because no one's going to get actually blowed up, most likely, I think. Well, but yeah, so the Dungeons & Dragons trailer, like, that could definitely, like, you got Chris Pine. He's very popular. People like him. He could definitely put some butts in seats to some degree, and it's just another thing that we're seeing within, popular media, Hollywood, whatever you want to call it these days, that is really starting to kind of like draw from the well of tabletop gaming. Comic books were big, and this is, we could say that tabletop games can be kind of comic book adjacent to some degree.
Right. There hasn't been a tabletop movie yet that has kind of hit that comic book level.
No.
But this is maybe the Batman movie or Spider-Man movie that might do it.
It's possible, yeah.
But it's like the first one, you're like, oh, actually, I'm kind of excited to see this one. Not the, oh, man, what did they do?
Right, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and it's like, 20 years ago, like when like E.T., like they're like, you see them playing D&D and E.T. And
right,
like,
exactly.
You're doing the whole like Leonardo
Like, hey,
DiCaprio.
look at that.
Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
I see it. And then now it's like the nowadays, like.
That's the thing. Nowadays, you're seeing tabletop gaming, specifically Dungeons & Dragons or role-playing in general, but all kinds of different things. You're starting to see that stuff crop up in all kinds of popular media outside of the Dungeons & Dragons trailer and stuff like that, and outside of E.T. Big Bang Theory,
It made sense. They were kind of,
Sure.
But yeah,
it was it was a very popular show. It was not necessarily to my liking, but I'm not super into sitcoms. But I know that it was popular, and they definitely like leaned heavily into that, and to some degree the comic book stuff. And you can say, oh yeah, but did it really help? I can tell you that it did, as far as like, I got a friend of mine who owns a comic shop, and like back when that show was still on the air, he was like, there's not a span of a couple of days that doesn't go by right now where somebody doesn't walk into the comic shop and look around and go, I've never been in a comic shop, but I've been watching that Big Bang Theory, so I figured I should come in. And he's like, it was happening all the time. So, it was actually converting people from like, I've never been in a comic shop.
I don't know what it's
now
all
I
about,
have,
too.
and maybe
Like,
I bought something that I saw in a Marvel movie, and now boom, So, definitely getting some conversions there. Stranger Things, with
right. It was like an '80s movie. And you're like, oh, that. But it started making. I ran at one of the RPG days, Stranger Things.
One of the free RPG days at game stores and stuff.
Yeah, I had an older couple that was like, hey, we thought it was pretty cool, and they were like, hey, we never got into this back in the '80s. Let's try it out now. So,
yeah. Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like a lot of people got real interested again in it because of just seeing that show on Netflix and being like, oh, man, I remember being down in the basement and casting Fireball and all that kind of stuff. Or maybe you never got a chance to, but you heard about it or you knew someone's older brother did it.
Right,
or
now that there's not the whole, satanic scare. Which
right, the satanic panic.
They brought up,
Yeah, exactly. They brought up in the fourth season of Stranger Things.
Which was awesome, like a big full circle.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But
then, a couple years ago, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago now, when they announced Onward from Pixar.
That, I think, was probably 2020 or 19. I think it was 2020 because didn't it go straight to Disney?
Yeah, it was like...
Because it was during the pandemic.
I think it was like the first one that didn't go to the theaters.
Yeah.
And that was just like, when they announced it, I'm like, wait a minute, are they, like, when they were like showing it, I'm like, wait a minute, did they just make a D&D? Oh, wait, it's all D&D.
Yeah, like a big, huge portion of that entire... Well, I mean, that's the point of the movie to some degree, is it's like, what if basically a D&D world turned into just a regular modern day kind of thing? You know what I mean? And but yeah, and it was well done. And again, you got big names in it. You got the kid who plays Spider-Man, Tom. What's his name?
Tobey Maguire?
No, the new Spider-Man.
Oh,
Tom.
Starts with an H, right?
Probably.
I'm thinking wrong guy.
I can't think of his name off the top of my head. And then also Chris Pratt plays his like older brother, right? Does he the voice? That's
Tom Holland.
Holland. There you go, Tom Holland. And that was. And the crazy like meta thing about that particular deal was, so it was a movie about a D&D universe, but in the modern day, and they were having to deal with kind of old, what you would call fantasy or Dungeons and Dragons type tropes. And then they made a role-playing game based off of it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's like a whole loop around, basically.
Yeah, that's very meta, right?
Exactly.
As the kids would say.
Exactly.
Or maybe the adults would say.
I don't know. Maybe they do. You were talking about that show. It's not a show that I've ever seen.
Yeah, so there's a new show that's newer show, Lone Star 911, which is a spinoff of the 911, which came out a few years ago on Fox. It's a fun, popcorny type show where if you just got to kind of let your brain relax for a little while. And
my wife likes to watch football, and so the only commercials I ever see generally, specifically on like Fox or anything like that, are when she's watching football. Sometimes I'll come in there. And I have seen like that 911 show, the original one, and it's just like all of LA is on fire because there's been a comet that's hit or something like that, and the cops have to run around. I'm like,
it's like a disaster movie of the week.
Like, exactly, yeah.
But yeah, Lone Star 911 this last week, I was telling Adam that I'm sitting there and then like two of the characters like hooked up and stuff, and then they were getting together, hang out with friends, and the friends knew something was weird was going on, because those two decided they didn't want to play Catan and wanted to play something else like Scattergories, and they're like, none of our group wants to play Scattergories.
Exactly.
We're a Catan group.
Yeah, we play Settlers of Catan.
And I'm just like sitting there like going, like, wow, this is weird that they're like talking about this just without any relevance.
It's getting more and more popular, but to the point where
they weren't
people,
like supposed to be like these nerd characters. These are all firefighters and policemen and stuff like that. So EMT workers.
And I was telling you about, and you hadn't heard about this, but the Green Bay Packers talking about the Green Bay Packers, like, they have board game night in the off season. And there was an article, you can look it up, from Washington Post, like back in like 2015, talking about how like they were all like completely addicted to Settlers of Catan, and they're very serious about it. And like, like one of the linemen like scolded another guy in the group because he was going to turn on music, and he's like, "No, we're playing Catan. That's not what we're doing right now." And it's just like, and there was this article in the Washington Post about it, and I'm like, "Well, that's just kind of crazy."
Yeah.
And and so you're seeing it pop up more and more in in the culture, in the pop culture and whatnot. Amongst TV shows on big networks, movies, coming up and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Game of Thrones, obviously not Dungeons and Dragons per se,
right? But that fantasy, like the amount of people that like it just became like the show that everybody was watching. Like
and Lord of the Rings. Like how many people went to see Lord of the Rings who'd never read a book, never played a D&D, none of that stuff, but they're like, well, this looks pretty cool,
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. It's the same type of thing. But then obviously there's the other, well, I was going to say the big elephant in the room, kind of depends on the room, I suppose. But then there's, of course, Critical Role, and then all of the things that are affiliated with that.
Yeah.
Because there's also now a animated TV series they did on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Vox Machina.
Yep.
Right?
And then there's a comic book, of course. That seems like it's a relatively simple crossover. And there are lots and lots of other people who are looking at that kind of template and being like, well, we can kind of do that or whatever, I mean, everyone from like small Twitch streamers who were just giving it a try to like bigger groups. What was that? Is that Dimension 20, I think it is? It's a bunch of the folks who are from College Humor.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so they've done a bunch of different like live play stuff, and it's been getting very popular for them.
The first time I ever heard like celebrities doing it, I think was like Penny Arcade, and like when they were first doing the acquisition, it was like, oh wow, there's people that I kind of know of personalities wise, and they're playing, and then it's just now it's like, Vin Diesel, you wouldn't. You're waiting, like they've got like celebrity ones now where celebrities are all playing it. And you're like,
we were talking before about what's his name? Stephen Colbert. Like he did a thing they were raising money for what's that? Their Red Nose campaign or whatever.
Okay, yep.
And I saw there was a video that was floating around on YouTube of it. Was him and Matt Mercer, who's the DM on Critical Role, and they were like playing D&D like to raise money or awareness or whatever for the red nose thing or whatever.
Yeah, and you're probably like, oh, well, that's really cool. Matt Mercer got to hang out with Stephen Colbert.
Right.
But probably Stephen Colbert was like, oh my gosh, I get to have Matt Mercer run a campaign.
Right,
for me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird, yeah.
And it's not just RPGs either. I mean, like, we've got Henry Cavill.
Yep. He's brought all that, like even building your own PC is a cool thing now.
Right, but I mean, like he got into or has been into for a while now, as it turns out, like Warhammer, like miniatures and stuff like that. He was painting, like during the pandemic, he was posting pictures on Instagram of him painting his Custodes army, and then earlier this year he went and visited the Warhammer headquarters.
That's right, yeah.
And so they were very glad to have him, obviously, and he walked around and they showed him all kinds of cool stuff and whatever.
Who doesn't want Superman walking around?
Yeah, or The Witcher or whoever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another one, The Witcher. I mean, The Witcher is basically Witcher's based off of a book, which is based it's based off of a video game / book. Yeah, something like that. But again, it's kind of kind of RPG-ish and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the video game is an RPG, which I'm actually going to start playing pretty soon, I think, hopefully.
Nice.
I bought it. I got it for super cheap, and I think I can play it on my little handheld Steam Deck thingy. So that'll be fun. We talked about Robin Williams too.
Yeah, I know he played D&D, but it sounds like he also played like Warhammer and painted. And
I don't think he painted. I think I'd always heard that he bought stuff and then had other people paint it for him, maybe. I'd always heard that he was definitely involved in and interested in Warhammer specifically. And I know. Remember that video game made by EA way back in the day called Spore?
Oh yeah,
that was going to be like a big deal.
I
and all
loved
that kind
Spore,
of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
except it was all peanut sponsors.
Yeah. But he basically they got him to like during like E3 or something. Like he was up on stage just like playing the game before it came out. It was like an early build, and he was just messing around talking and stuff like that. And I'm sure that EA paid him to be there, but I felt like he kind of was just like, yeah, I'll come and hang out and do that. That sounds sort of fun. I get to play that game early. But yeah, he was super into that kind of stuff from what I understand.
Yeah, I was just reading Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He said he used to play D&D, but actually plays a lot of Magic the Gathering now.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. He was a Robin in the Batman.
Oh wow, yeah. If you go, yep.
The last movie, whatever the last Nolan movie, Batman, Dark Knight Returns, Dark Knight
Rises.
Yep.
Yeah, and then he's been in a lot of Christopher Nolan stuff.
Yeah. He was in. You're right. He's in Inception.
Third Rock from the Sun is.
Yeah, that's back when he was young. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, there's a lot of. And then didn't you say Anderson Cooper?
Yeah, I read that he even he almost had to take off days from work because he was so upset when his last character died.
That's a bummer. But yeah, no, that's the thing is that, I think it's one of those things that's kind of more popular than some people might understand.
Yeah, well, and I think because people are starting to hear, oh, this person plays it, they're okay saying, well, yeah, I play it too.
Oh, yeah. Well, how many times do you see that article rolling around about Joe last name I can't remember, Maglia, no something or
yeah,
and because he's got a group of Hollywood folks who comes to his house and then down in the basement they sit there and they play D&D and it's a whole. Mm-hmm. I've seen that article hop up, or YouTube channel or whatever multiple times, and so it's the question is it one of those kind of fly by night things? Remember when poker got super popular for a while, and a lot of Hollywood people were playing
everybody
poker.
Bought their own chips and
exactly right. Yeah. Now I don't know that this is necessarily the same type of deal, but I don't know. I mean, maybe. I guess the real important question is that what will all of this, and I'm making air quotes here, exposure do to our tabletop gaming? And when I say it like that, I sound kind of like a jerk, don't I?
A little gatekeepy.
Yeah, exactly. That's the trick. And I think that's the thing that we don't want to do.
No. I mean...
Because the plan is hopefully it brings new people in the hobby.
Right. There's very little that can be gained by you being like, well, I played D&D before it was cool.
Right. Exactly. There's no... Yeah. I mean, well, even if you wanted to say, oh, I played D&D before it was cool... That's great as long as you then follow up with and let me know if you have any questions or that. But don't be like, and so the rest of you are all just a bunch of posers. That's a bad follow up to that. But yeah, that's the thing. I know that there are people out there. I've heard that. Well, heard is a strong word. I've seen them on Twitter and other places as well. But I know that there are people out there who are unhappy about. They will be unhappy no matter what. With
people
with
coming
the
into their space, what they think is their space.
Well, there's that too. But I mean, when Lord of the Rings movies came out, there were people out there who were like, "This isn't right," and they did this wrong. And this part,
there was already ones off the movie trailer about
for D&D.
There was. I went through the Reddit. There was a Reddit thread that was debating whether or not the druid could ever turn into a owlbear.
Right.
And there were at least 5 different ways of how it was completely wrong and would never happen, and 5 ways that it could definitely happen if it was this particular spell or type.
I mean, that's kind of the point of Dungeons and Dragons.
And then someone's like, "You don't know the DM that
exactly
that they're playing their campaign."
That's the benefit of the tabletop gaming genre is that you'd be like, "Yeah, let's not do that rule," or like, "No, let's change it," or whatever.
Right,
I mean, that's what's great. Like in video games. If you can change your video games, sometimes you can get in there and do some modding and stuff like that. You have to be good at programming, and the game has to allow it, and there's a lot of other factors that are involved. But when you and your friends are sitting around playing Magic, board games, D&D, miniatures, whatever, you just be like, hey, let's change this. Let's make a house rule. Let's not do this thing. I mean...
It can be for the better or it can be for the worse.
Sure.
Free parking.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Good old Monopoly. I remember, in the 2018 version of Kill Team, there was a thing in Kill Team where at the beginning of the game, before the game actually started, you would do this thing called the scouting phase, where it had this almost dumb little mini game that everybody ignored, including Games Workshop. Once Games Workshop started having tournaments and stuff like that, they would just in their tournament package, it would say scouting phase, and we're skipping the scouting phase. You're like, well, then why did you put it in there? So yeah, it's.
Peter really wanted it in there,
I guess.
And just.
So strangely enough, there is a guy whose name is Peter. He's one of the top one of the guys.
Peter's darn it!
I think you just guessed. I'm sure he's not listening, but yeah. No. Anyway, but my point is that you have the ability to change things. So, in a book, if you're like, oh yeah, and then the UFOs landed in, Lord of the Rings, you'd be like, that didn't technically happen. I mean, I'm going to let it go. If it's still cool, I'm going to be like, yeah, great, whatever. My wife will get a little sketchy about it because she's very kind of serious about Lord of the Rings, but she'll still also, it's fine.
Did you see the whole controversy about the latest Lord of the Rings trailer for
the
Prime
Amazon
Video?
Prime thing?
Yeah. I guess Sauron is like completely different than it was in the movies, so people are like, "Well, that's not what Sauron looks like."
Well, he's a young Sauron.
I don't know.
Well, because Sauron in the movies that came out, in the early 2000s, was a giant honking like guy in armor.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Well, he was also the eye up in the thing, right? But he was also the guy in the big armor and stuff like that. And from what I understand, that little kind of blonde guy with the short hair and the weird eyebrows in the trailer, that's technically Sauron. And I didn't know that until I looked something up, or someone was like, "Oh, and there's Sauron." And I'm like, I'm assuming it's when he's younger.
I saw someone that goes, just for everybody's reference, Sauron looks like this in the book. And it was just the word printed of Sauron.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. People get real overexcited about that kind of stuff. And I think specifically in the gaming sphere, it's sometimes even more so because as tabletop gamers, we're generally pretty concerned with rules. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of our thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, but sometimes whether or not the druid can turn into an owlbear and jump onto a horse and take off, again, you don't know the DM. That could totally happen.
Right.
I've played role playing games that weird stuff's happened. That
would have been
normal. That's another Friday night, basically. Yeah, I get you. No. So I don't think it's necessarily bad I don't think it's bad at all when Hollywood gets in there. Now, don't get me wrong, the previous Dungeons and Dragons movie was bad. I think it was very bad. I don't think that it hurt Dungeons and Dragons, frankly, probably.
No, but I mean, I know people like to, look back at it fondly because of nostalgia, but I mean, think of the original Batman and Hulk stuff. They weren't great.
Okay, are you talking about like the Hulk TV show with Lou Ferrigno?
Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, if that came out today in that present form, you would be like, oh my gosh.
You'd be like, why is this in 4:3 and not 16:9? Why is it in SD and not HD? But yes, also, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, but now obviously we've had I don't know how many Hulk movies since then, and my wife and I like
the She-Hulk thing.
Oh yeah, She-Hulk's coming out soon too.
That's looking decent.
Yeah. No, the Hulk one that was directed by Ang Lee. Like my wife and I are like the few people who seem to like that one, but we do like that one. I don't remember that one. That's the one that had Eric Bana in it and Nick Nolte. No, and we like that one. But that's the thing. Lots of people like a lot of different things, and so when you have more exposure to it, that's cool. Now, again, with the with the comic books, we know that it has caused people to buy comic books. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so, therefore, this exposure is definitely going to bring, it is going to be the milkshake that will very potentially bring more, boys to the yard or whatever. If the yard being tabletop gaming, the analogy is breaking down. Don't get me wrong, but. And so more people in the hobby equals more products and more diversity, more events. Yeah, and more money as well, sure, certainly. Which, for designers who are like trying to get people to play games, that's kind of cool. That's helpful.
Right. If you're like, oh, man, I'm not going to be able to, I can't go on my own. I won't be able to sell enough games. I mean, look at video games now with indie. I mean,
sure.
There are so many indie games on Steam right now, but it doesn't, there a lot of them are being played. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. Now, if you want to be as rich as the Marvel folks, well, there's not a lot of room for that. There's not a lot of room for people who make more sales than Wizards of the Coast. There's not a lot of room for people who make more sales than
it'll be considered like the AAA.
Exactly, but there's also plenty of space out there for smaller kind of indie stuff. And when people start finding the popular stuff. Some people stay with popular stuff for their entire lives, and that's totally fine. Same with music, there are people out there who are like, I only listen to the stuff that's popular, or whatever. Although very frequently people have a tendency to listen to the stuff that's popular when they were, say, around high school, then maybe college, and then they just keep listening to that, and then that stuff becomes oldies. So I don't know anybody like that that's happening to right now, of course.
No, I don't go, hey, this radio station becomes so good.
Yeah, it's the oldest station. Oh, that's a bummer. Yeah. But that all being said, the popular music the popular music that brings you into the appreciation music very then frequently branches off into oh no, I'm interested in this weird indie stuff that very few people know about, and,
and allows enough, like, I mean, think of like the Cannes movie festival, or
sure,
what's the one in the US?
Sundance, yeah.
Like, you could start seeing, big shows like that of like, hey, instead of Gen Con, this is,
Well, you could start seeing like the Origins Awards meaning more to more people. You could start seeing the Ennies like mean more to more people and things like that, But all of these things, like, some people, I still believe this, that a rising tide raises all ships. Mm-hmm. I mean, scientifically, I'm pretty sure it's the way things work.
Unless it was not the ships that sank already.
Oh yeah, good point. But no, I mean, like, I think in general, it is a thing that does definitely help. And so, getting that more exposure, bringing more people in the hobby, more products, diversity, etc.
I mean, people always complain. They're like, "Oh, Hollywood's run out of movies. We can only take so many reboots. Like,
sure,
hey, let them have a wide open, like a Fireball Island game. I mean,
we did a episode. I was looking this up before. We did an episode 32 of this podcast, where we talked about
movies and shows.
Yeah, like games that we'd like to see, like movies and TV shows and video games or whatever, all kinds of other properties made off of. So yeah, there's a lot of that going around out there. There's a lot of stories here that the well is pretty deep. That if they want to make movies, TV shows. Heck, comic books, I don't know, whatever,
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Yeah, they could have done instead of Jumanji, it could be Fireball Island right now.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. That's a very good point. And how many of those movies they made now? There was the original one with Robin Williams, and now there's been a bunch of them with The Rock.
There's two other ones now, which are technically based on a video game that this
right.
evolved.
Well, it's evolved, yeah.
But yeah, it's still good.
Yeah.
Pokemon movies. Although, is that considered...
One of these days, my wife and I are going to watch Detective Pikachu.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, man, we haven't watched it yet, though.
But I just like Ryan Reynolds. I mean,
sure. Well,
I can sit there and watch Mint mobile commercials.
Sure.
He has a spell on me. Oh.
Darn that Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, but so it brings more people in the hobby. It brings in potentially more money. It makes more products and all that kind of stuff. But we kind of talked a little bit about acceptance and about how it's one of those things where, we as gamers have to not be gatekeepy and not be like, oh man, you guys don't,
right.
Like the whole concept, like there's that meme that goes around if you see somebody with a T-shirt on for a band and you're like, oh, you like that band? Name 5 of their albums or whatever, that kind of thing.
They've only had 3 albums.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, all right, whatever. But like it's the same type of thing. Like if you like Star Wars and you want to wear a Star Wars T-shirt, why should I be the guy who says you don't know the difference between stormtroopers and death troopers?
Right.
Like,
if you only like Grogu and just think of him as Baby Yoda.
Oh yeah, Grogu, right? Yeah,
Grogu.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
See,
there you go.
I'm totally
totally a poser. Yeah.
Like I don't care. Like awesome. I'm glad that you found enjoyment in that.
Exactly, and that acceptance, and to the they're like, okay, maybe technically rules is written, you can't turn into a owl bear or whatever. I guess like in the trailer,
right.
But it looks pretty dope, and I bet you it's probably pretty fun in the movie. And again,
and then that was the other thing. It's like sometimes the cool factor is okay. Like John Wick. There are tons of stuff that is probably completely inaccurate with guns and everything else with John Wick. But it's fun.
If you want to watch a totally accurate, completely, absolutely correct movie, even in documentary form, I don't think it's ever happened. You know what I mean? Like literally,
right.
like there's always
there's some kind of
this guy's not usually
license.
that well lit. You know what I mean? Like
right.
that's that just everything. There's always something there, And so yeah, exactly. It's creative license. Like think about like Iron Man. Like in the Iron Man movies, they never really touched on the alcoholism as much as they did during that run in the comics. There was like a run in the comics where they talked about Tony Stark being an alcoholic and how he had to like basically kind of get clean and all that kind of stuff.
Huh.
And they never really touched that. They kind of got into PTSD, like and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but that was because PTSD wasn't as big of a deal in the 90s when it was a whole thing. So these things all evolve, I guess, is the point.
Right.
And so, if they decide to make a cool movie based off of Settlers of Catan, I don't know, that sounds kind of interesting, but I have to suspect it's not going to be perfectly exactly just about trading wood for sheep and stuff like that. There's going to be more to it, because otherwise nobody wants to watch that, as it turns out.
Right.
But
yeah, hopefully, they do it justice, and they give nods.
Sure.
I know there's a lot of times, like my friends that are more comic book savvy, when one of the new movies comes out, they're like, "Oh, this little thing that was in this back was a reference to this particular issue." And I'm like,
they love to do that, and especially in the comic book movies. And stuff
I'm
like that.
That's awesome that you not only that they did that, but that you noticed it.
Yeah, in the most recent Moon Knight, we were watching that. Like one of the last episodes of Moon Knight, there was like a shot outside of a building. It was like a medical center or something like that, and it was named Sienkiewicz Medical Center, and that's named after Bill Sienkiewicz, who's like this very, very, very well-known artist in the industry, and who's done a ton of stuff for Marvel, and also he's done a bunch of work on Moon Knight, and also like New Mutants, and he was also super involved in Legion. So like even in the TV shows and the movies, like the movie for New Mutants, he was involved as like a what do you call it, like a consultant? You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
And same with I think. Legion, which I never watched Legion, but I heard it was really good. But yeah, so I think it's worked out pretty well for comic books.
I think they're doing a better job of not turning on the fans and trying to embrace the fandom. So
I agree.
I'm cautiously optimistic after seeing D&D that they might be able to let us have some fun watching some of our games come to life. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there is something to be said about how sometimes things will eventually just get watered down and like maybe even possibly overexposed. Right, where they're like, okay, like, yeah, we don't need some of the Justice League movies. I mean, there are some people that are just like, there are too many comic book movies now. And I'm like, well, you don't have to see them all, as it turns out. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's... And then there was times when I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not watching another DC movie. And then I found out they were kind of rebooting Suicide Squad, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is... And then I absolutely loved it. So exactly, yeah. The new Suicide Squad movie was really good. And then the Peacemaker show. Peacemaker was spectacular. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. So I've have to remind myself many times that I was one of the first ones, like, Heath Ledger is not going to make a good Joker. Right, exactly. Yeah. And then was proven wrong. Right, yeah. So I'm just going to let the people that know how to do these things give it a shot, because they probably know more than I do. And like I said, in general, if the stuff is popular and if it works out well, it will bring more people to our hobby. Right. I mean, it'd be awesome to see some really cool Warhammer movies come out. I mean, they are doing their own animation stuff these days. Right, but I mean, like... But you can only see it if you sign up to Warhammer Plus. I was kind of hoping that they were going to do some of it like on Amazon Prime or something like that. But, because Amazon Prime, you can get nearly anything on Amazon Prime, it seems like, to some degree. So I was kind of hoping that's where they were going to go, but instead they decided to do it themselves. Which, I get it from a money standpoint, but yeah, if you don't have that... Almost like any of their stuff, they would be like, oh, after a year, we'll put it onto this streaming service as well. Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, but it would be cool to see. And yeah, I would love to see. I've heard that Henry Cavill is like talking with them and like, hey, you guys should make a movie. Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah? Who would be great as Eisenhorn? Like the not interrogator, the Inquisitor? Henry Cavill. Like, I mean, then that way he could be Superman and also The Witcher, and then he could also be Eisenhorn. There was talk about at one point that he was maybe they were going to look at him for 007. I'm like, why not just be all those guys? That'd be awesome. But yeah, no, I think he would be great. He would need to be just a little bit older, or else they just have to paint him up to make him look older. That's not hard. It's easier to make older than younger, but yeah, he would... Exactly. Benjamin Button, very good point. But yeah, so that would be, I would like to see him do Eisenhorn, thank you. There's my vote. And I'd bring more, again, folks into the fold, and I would like as many folks in the fold as possible. Yes. Indeed. Well, thanks again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below.
If you're listening via your favorite podcast player or just aren't into the whole YouTube comments section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@iamgamefor.com. You can also keep up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website at www.iamgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.